boardroom. This is the business of esports. The worlds of gaming and esports are evolving every day faster than ever before. With yougov's living data, you can probe into the real thoughts and behaviors of esports fans and gamers worldwide. If you're a team, a brand, an agency, or a rights holder, you should be talking with yougov. They're partners with the biggest names in esports and the biggest brands all around the world, driving compelling results every single day. Check out yougov.com/BOE and schedule a call with yougov today. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show / post podcast live stream. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta and Lindsay the Boss Poss. For those of you who are new here, welcome. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. Best of all, we get to do it live with you guys. So if you're new here, welcome. We encourage you to comment, to ask questions, to disagree, to agree. It's a safe space. If you're listening to this after the fact, and I know the majority of you do, or the majority of you lurk, that's okay too. We still appreciate you being a part of this. How are you guys doing this week?
I think Jimmy should go first this week since he's having a dramatic day.
I'm doing okay. Just had some puppy issues at home. Dog owners know what that's like, but so that's why we're about 5 minutes late today. That one's on me, guys. I apologize.
Lindsay, great to see you back on camera. Healthy,
Yes.
I hope.
Getting there slowly but surely. I can't believe surgery was only a month ago. Sometimes I forget that's not that long to have, someone digging around in your knee. So trying to take it slow.
It's good to have you back on camera. Guys, I just want to tease the podcast this week because we just finished recording it. Great episode with two guys from Bad Moon Talent. So Reed Trimble, who's their vice president of partnerships, and Andrew Drake, who's a co-founder and CEO at Bad Moon Talent. They represent a whole bunch of broadcast talent, content creators. They've worked with a bunch of brands. It was a really fun conversation. Both of them come, or at least Andrew has a very extensive gaming and esports background, having worked at Activision Blizzard for quite a while, and so a lot of interesting insights there on the talent front. Lots to unpack. I highly recommend everybody listen to that episode when it drops this week, or Friday, Saturday when it usually drops. So really appreciated having those guys on. All right, let's jump into some news, guys. We got high octane gaming news show this week. Some interesting stories. And I think we have to start with Fortnite because last week we did, I don't even know, 3 Fortnite stories at least. And Fortnite back in the news this week, although probably not the way they would have wanted. And the headline here, hang on if I share my screen. The headline here is Fortnite maker Epic Games to pay $520 million in record-breaking FTC settlement. So Epic Games here has agreed to pay a total of $520 million to settle U.S. government allegations that it misled millions of players, including children and teens, into making unintended purchases, and that it violated a landmark federal children's privacy law. Now, as part of this, part of the $520 million, Epic's going to pay $275 million to the U.S. government to resolve claims it violated the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, which, Lindsay, you mentioned when we discussed it last week, by gathering the personal information of kids under the age of 13 without first receiving their parents' verifiable consent. It's the largest fine the FTC has ever imposed for a rule that it enforces. Now, in a second and separate settlement, it says Epic, so the balance of the $520 million, which is a $245 million fine, Epic's going to pay $245 million as refunds to consumers who were allegedly harmed by user interface design choices that the FTC claimed were deceptive. So interesting here that, I mean, I find some sort of total aside. Let me start with, there's a little bit of like cosmic karma here with Tim Sweeney having tried to sue, Apple up the wazoo and sort of on this lawsuit kind of rampage, only to end up getting sued himself and I guess essentially losing here, and having to pay a lot of fines, $500 million in fines. But Lindsay, let's start with you here. What do you think of this? And if you can, tie it back to the conversation we had last week. And remember those accounts, those special 13 and under accounts. Does it all make more sense to you now?
Oh yeah, Jimmy totally called it. So when it's his time, like he gets to have bragging rights for sure. The one thing I want to tie it back to though is we talked about initially, one of the things that we talked about those accounts is, oh, now it's possible maybe to advertise to kids that are younger. And there was like a whole joke about cereal and Fortnite cereal and stuff. COPPA is one of the biggest privacy protection laws that you don't want to mess with. And this is why. And I think I had noted that then, that the accounts that they make for children that they now designate as children, the privacy protections there will be stronger than a normal account, because historically there's actually real enforcement of COPPA laws, as there should be. So at least that tiny part I got right. And I still think that by segmenting out their younger consumers, they're doing themselves a favor in the long run. It's unfortunate, as usual, that this is a reactionary measure and not a preventative measure. I truly wish that more companies would think better strategy when it comes to dealing with regulations, and mostly when it comes to dealing with COPPA, because this is the one you don't want to mess with. So I hope that other companies take note and actually put in preventative measures instead of having to deal with this. I think Fortnite's a little unique in that it obviously caters to a much younger population or much younger consumer regularly than other games do, but I certainly hope that they're able to use this as a strategy to build up a bifurcated audience in the content that they're giving. But it's really unfortunate that it's reactionary.
I want to add to that, Paul, because I consulted, I think, for about 4 years in this space after I left law, and one of the things you noticed consulting for a number of different companies, the similarities in that all of them would rather ask for forgiveness than pay up front and do things by the book the first time around. It's kind of common, right? Because you running lean, there's a lot of risks to be had, or to be taken rather. So it's kind of unfortunate, but seems to be common practice. Not that it's an excuse or justifiable. To me, the question I would, because we talked a lot about the story last week, and it raised a lot of questions, and this definitely was where I was leaning in a, sick pleasure, I guess, or kind of happy to be right, but not happy because, it's unfortunate circumstances of minors being taken advantage of. To me, the question I would ask to you guys is, do you think it's better that Epic put out that story last week just to maybe lessen the blow here? Or should they have sat on that and announced it next week as a reactionary measure, like, hey, yeah, we got caught with our hand in the cookie jar. Here's what we're doing about it. We're already on top of it. Immediate response, immediate mitigating factor, right? Do you get, the PR move in terms of either trying to get in front of it or softening it? I think softening it, honestly, because it only raised questions to me beforehand, and I immediately suspected an ulterior motive. And I don't know how many other people are like that. I would imagine quite a bit. So I would say if they responded to this story next week with, here's what we're already doing about it, look how quickly we jumped on top of this, then because again, now the news cycle of Epic launching all of these protections from last week is being replaced by this current story. So if you Google Epic, this is the most current published thing, versus if they put out that those age restricted accounts, what have you, that we covered last week. Next week, you kind of bury this in the news cycle a little bit, and you also respond to it.
Does it really matter though, Jimmy, at the end of the day? Meaning who's the audience for this article, right? It's not going to stop people from playing Fortnite, okay? Right? That's not. So
angry moms, I guess, but yeah.
Maybe angry moms, maybe. But it seems like most of the angry moms are going to be made whole, right? There's 245 million in refunds. But this potentially gives more sort of teeth to to that Quebec lawsuit or whatever, right? That we sort of half joked about,
Yeah,
but in this context
unfortunately.
seems completely legitimate. But it's more like investors, right? I would think that maybe you worry about, because Epic is still a private company. And while they've raised a lot of money and while Fortnite makes a lot of money, $500 million is not like chump change here. This is a pretty stiff loss.
What was their last valuation? Do you recall? Was it 17 billion or are
28
they
billion, I think.
28 now? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, it's like you said, it's sizable, whether it's 17, 28 or more.
But I guess, do we see, and I just wanted to add, because I alluded to it at the beginning, that I do think part of it is they attracted this. They did, like, they became this very litigious focused company, and I think lost sight of what they should be really focused on. And in some ways, again, it's not Cosmic Karma has no business basis, but it's sort of like when you get in the mud and you start fighting in the mud, eventually you're going to get mud on you at some point, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Apple was, call it tinfoil hat theory, right? But if Apple had sent some information to the FTC, I don't know. It seems like a really big, this is not a slap on the wrist. This is a big fine. And sorry, my last question to you guys is, do you think they're trying to set up Epic Games as an example here? Are they trying to make an example of this?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there is also just a lot of energy, political energy on all sides of the spectrum in general about protecting kids. And kids in video games has always been a very hot topic. So I think that as we move kind of into this new age, and Epic is the one building metaverses and the Unreal Engine also, it's easy. If they had done this against a much smaller publisher, it wouldn't have had the same waves, obviously. So yeah, I definitely think that they're using this as an example. And in some ways, like you said, rightly so, because they bring a lot of attention upon themselves in other ways as well. I do think it was a mistake to say, we're not the big fish. These are the bigger fish. Go after them. When in reality, from the FTC's perspective and who's in charge there, they're all big fish, and there's no stratification of how big the fish are. So I definitely think that they're using it as an example, and I hope that other people pay attention.
It's definitely a big deterrent. Let me just get caught up here. Matt says the only thing that makes Wednesdays bearable. Christian says the boss cam is back. Icy Dark, welcome. Welcome to the stream. Matt says, I feels like there's a lot of infighting in the gaming space right now. Can't be good for the industry. I mean, it's definitely not good for the industry. I kept saying forever that Epic Games had their focus on the wrong thing. Christian says a very expensive lesson for a very prominent company. Yeah. This story I think is going to blow over. Like, no one's going to be talking about this a month from now. The question is, what does this do to Epic Games valuation the next time they go to raise money? What does it do? Are investors going to be asking more questions? Like, what is the impact from a business standpoint beyond, when people stop talking about the story? That I don't think anyone's going to stop playing Fortnite, but what happens to the business when they have to go raise another $1 billion or $2 billion to keep the business growing? Will this affect the valuation? Things like that. Those are, I think, the consequences that we may see and we may find out at some point. All right, guys, let's talk about a more positive story. And Jimmy, you mentioned this when we taped the podcast, and I think it's interesting because it was definitely unexpected. I don't think anyone saw this coming. And the headline here is, High on Life is biggest Xbox Game Pass launch of 2022, Microsoft confirms. The new game from Rick and Morty's Justin Roiland is performing well on Xbox. It's the #1 most popular Xbox Game Pass title. The biggest release, basically, that they had. And it beat out, obviously, things like Minecraft, Forza, etc. on that week. On Steam, it doesn't rank in the top 100 most played games, but it's #3 on the bestseller list for games. And ironically, I guess, or not ironically, but on It's technically fourth because the Steam Deck hardware is number one. Now, the reviews say 7 out of 10. It's an interesting sort of single player, Rick and Morty style comedy game. But is this surprising, guys? And I guess the question I have is this a testament to it being a good game, or can we read into this and say maybe there's life for Xbox Game Pass launches? Like, the Xbox Game Pass is not just the place where old games go to sort of retire, but that it's a place where you can launch new titles with interesting IP, and the reception will be incredibly positive. I don't know. Talk to me about how you think this serves Game Pass.
Limiting the question, I definitely want to tackle that, but I want to broaden it too, obviously. Because I played Trover Save. You asked a few questions before you limited it there. I played Trover Saves the Universe, another title from Squanch Games. Loved it. So I was really excited for this to come out. And I do believe this is coming out on PC and PlayStation, if not already. I think maybe it's a limited exclusive where it starts on Xbox and then rolls out to other platforms. But anyone that's a fan of the Rick and Morty franchise in general, I think is familiar with all of the different IP that those guys are putting out. Some of it very, very good. Some of it not so much in my opinion. But again, having played Trover, I was excited for this one. I saw all the marketing highlights and thought it was going to be really fun. Not to the point of your question on limiting it to Game Pass. I don't have Game Pass. Like I said, on the podcast, I like to buy the games and always have them in case they ever get taken off. Also, I just don't have the time to play that many games. So I feel like I come out ahead because maybe I buy one or two over the course of the year. I don't know. I think I have some friends that are only going to play this because it's on Game Pass and they're excited to. Me personally, I dropped the 60 or 70 or whatever it was without even thinking twice because I knew I really wanted to play the game and I thought it looked great. And the clips are really funny. Like the gun that you're playing with talks back to you and kind of reacts to the things you do in game. It looks entertaining. What I would say is I think the success of this game, I wouldn't necessarily attribute it to Game Pass, so that's definitely a huge contributing factor. I would say it also speaks to the need for great storytelling, which we continually support and speak about on this show. You can't have a great game, I think, without a great storytelling. Squanch Games and the writing team behind that are experts at storytelling, and now they're trying it out in new mediums. And hopefully I beat it over the weekend. We'll see what kind of time I have, and then I'll let you guys know if it lives up to the hype. But I would definitely say, yeah, Paul, one combination of limiting it to Xbox before releasing to other titles. You see that in music as well, where they'll be exclusive to Apple before going to Spotify. And two, I just think that the story in this looks really enticing, and I can't wait to dive in.
Lindsay, any thoughts? Any extra thoughts on this?
Yeah, I feel like because of the power of the IP behind it, they were able to kind of capitalize on FOMO a little bit by releasing to Xbox first. I don't think that this works in every situation, and it, like Jimmy said, he's played the previous games. Rick and Morty is like such a powerful franchise, especially among men ages 18 to 35, which greatly overlaps with the gaming audience. So it was the right audience for sure, and I think that this kind of drip release, where a lot of people have access to it really quickly via Xbox Game Pass, definitely can create FOMO for people who are on PC or PlayStation. So I think that it's a little bit of clever marketing to start with a subscription-based service and go out. We're obviously seeing like movies do that a lot, and it's put out there and in theaters at the same time to try to get people to maybe go to the box office and see it in a bigger experience if people love it on Netflix or whatever. Like I said, I don't think this works with everything, but it's pretty cool to see someone come up with a strategy that actually like gets FOMO to be a factor in playing the game.
Yeah, I'm encouraged for Xbox on this story that, Game Pass could, I think, down the line be that launching new games with great IP as Game Pass exclusives could still see, like, it's a big enough audience now, it's a big enough player base that the game can have success. In my mind, that's the bigger threat to Steam than Epic Games Store ever will be, right? Maybe that's the interesting sort of take here, that all the money Epic Games has spent on building their Epic Games Store, and when in reality, Game Pass is maybe the biggest competitor to Steam these days as a consequence. Matt says, this is one of the few games I would actually consider buying this year. Seems like it would be fun in a way that Elden Ring, Ragnarok, God of War Ragnarok isn't. Yeah, I mean, Matt, this totally different feel, completely different style of game, way, doesn't take itself so seriously. Night and day difference with Elden Ring, especially, and with God of War. Matt says, too bad I don't have an Xbox. Yeah, that is a requirement. Although you can get Game Pass on your phone, I think. There is, I think, an app on your phone where you can play it on your phone. This game is a success because Rick and Morty fans are loyal AF almost to a fault. That's also true. But I think to Lindsay's point, the IP here, very strong. The love for Rick and Morty, very high, especially in that male, 18 to 34 kind of age group. All right, guys, let's talk about BMW in the news this week. Not such a great story, this one. And the headline is BMW reduces esports sponsorship spend moving into 2023. Now, BMW is, according to this article, heavily reducing its investment in esports team sponsorship, with some partner teams no longer displaying the German car manufacturer's logo on their jerseys. Now, in 2020, they had partnered with Fnatic, G2, Cloud9, T1, and Fun Plus Phoenix, and they added OG in 2021. Now it seems like they're pulling back. A lot of the teams are removing the BMW logo from their jersey. And what they're saying is obviously they're anticipating recession, so they're pulling back from, doing promotion in general. But esports seems to be the first industry that they're pulling back from. Now, do you guys think this is an esports issue, or was BMW never the right fit? Like, do you guys? Because I think when BMW started signing all these teams, I said, I'm not sure how many viewers, are going to go out and buy BMWs. How many, 22-year-old esports fans are going to be going out and buying BMWs? But I'm curious to get your thoughts, right? This pullback, is it just because the time and the place and the market, or do you think there's a fit issue here? Jimmy?
I don't think it's necessarily the wrong fit. I think that esports was one of the newer industries that BMW decided to activate against, and because of, like you said, the expected recession, because of inventory issues, you see marketing budgets being slashed across the board everywhere. And I just think first in, first out, or for whatever that expression is, I feel like maybe it's just an area they have less data on, and so if they're going to reduce their spend, they're going to take it away from something that's untested, as opposed to knowing a different market very well. So it's definitely unfortunate, because you want to see the industry do well, you want to see it attract new names and retain those names. One of the things I was most impressed by when we interviewed Steve Aronset, the CEO of Team Liquid, was that they had 100% retention rate with their sponsors. That blew my mind over 7 years. So you hate seeing a sponsor that's new to the space, or relatively new to the space, that's backing out. But I don't think it speaks towards esports, because even with video games on the decline, we had Jake Phillips from Stream Hatchet on the show a couple of weeks ago, suggesting that esports viewership was the only thing that was maintaining course or speed, even though viewership on Twitch overall was down to around pre-pandemic levels. So I wouldn't blame esports here. I think I would just blame the timing. But I'm curious, Lindsay, if you disagree.
I think that you're definitely right about timing. I do also feel like we're entering a pretty big shift period for esports versus gaming at large. I think BMW probably has a better opportunity in gaming at large than it might have with specific teams. And this isn't a fully fleshed out thought, but just advertising mechanisms are getting better. In-game advertising is getting better. Advertising to people who play racing games is getting better. Like there's all kinds of newer things that weren't necessarily available even like pre-pandemic or just a year ago, where I think that people may start to shift their advertising dollars towards, because people are spending fewer and fewer advertising dollars. And that does concern me for the future of like professional esports and those kinds of sponsorships and partnerships. Like I said, that's not a fully fleshed out thought, and that's more of a 2023 trend to look out for kind of thing. I don't know exactly what I think about BMW specifically in this sponsorship pulling out. But yeah, I don't know, Paul, I'd be curious to know what you think.
Do you think they were a good fit, Lindsay? Like, was there a good fit between the audience and the brand?
I mean, you all know that I don't ever feel great about like luxury brands in gamers. I wasn't. I mean, I feel like medium towards them. I think sometimes they're awesome, and other times not so much. I think luxury clothes works well because that's attainable. Luxury cars, spending $500 to $1,000 versus $70,000. I don't know. I In order to confidently make an assertion on that, I would love to see what the demographics are like and who they're trying to target. Off the cuff, like initial reactions, it doesn't feel like a great fit. But I am open to being wrong about that, I guess, is the thing.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like the pullback could also be just related to the type of activation, right? Like raw sort of 2020 or not 2019 when these deals were probably negotiated, putting your logo on a jersey maybe felt more valuable than today, where that has sort of is not as exciting anymore, and people are looking for more branded content and influencer driven kind of marketing and things that are maybe more integrated than just sort of slapping the BMW logo on a jersey. So part of me wants to believe that this is just a reset from we need to rethink how we activate, not a total pullback forever from the space.
Yeah, I love that thought, Paul. It definitely makes sense that as teams are reevaluating their own strategy with content versus esports, that advertisers would be as well. And I think you're dead on that branded integration might be a better fit for them. But at that point, does it fall on, we just had Bad Mood Talent on the show, as you mentioned, and they referenced their 360 services where they work with brands like BMW, Coca-Cola, who come to them and say, hey, here's our marketing spend. You're the experts. Tell us how to make use of these dollars. Would it make sense then that, is this on BMW to figure out or whatever agency they're using to figure out how to better spend those ad dollars? Or do you think maybe it's on the leagues and the publishers that could give them more opportunities to be more seamlessly integrated? There's discussion of, for example, adding billboards in game, right? Where if you're, playing a driving game, or even if you're playing Fortnite or something, there's, natural kind of integrated advertisements, like you said. So it's not just a logo on a jersey somewhere, but it's actually part of the experience. I think we talked also about sports games like NBA 2K and Madden have Gatorade halftime. If you play FIFA, the banner around the stadium has the advertisements just like the real stadium does. So I don't know if it's on someone like BMW, their agency, or the publisher. I guess that's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, I mean that feels like a little bit heavier lift, right? Going and integrating in game. I don't know if any of these big brands are really ready to take that level of jump just yet. But I think with the right agency, many of them will come back and I think be smarter about the way they activate. It won't be just a logo slapped on a jersey. That's my hope, at least, right? That they get a good partner that understands the space really well and sees value in the gaming audience, and most importantly understands how to speak to it. I think that's maybe what was missing here. I don't think anyone was looking at the jersey going, oh, BMW, I should go buy one, right? Like, if you're going to use it to create brand affinity, a logo on a jersey in my mind doesn't work. You need content. So it'll be interesting to see if BMW comes back and how they come back into the space. Chris says, I just don't see the need for automobile sponsorships for esports orgs when they themselves aren't involved in racing esports. I mean, I don't know if that's totally fair, because a sponsor could sponsor anything. They don't have to necessarily be involved in it. I'm not sure I agree, Chris, that just because you're not into racing esports, like only teams that have racing esports can have auto sponsors. That I don't necessarily agree with. But I guess we'll see what happens with BMW. Guys, before I get to the next story, I just want to say this live stream, this weekly news show, very generously sponsored by YouGov. YouGov produces the absolute best data on games, gamers, esports fans all around the world. If you want to access this very valuable gaming audience, you absolutely need to be talking to YouGov. You need to you need a partner like them that can give you actionable data that allows you to make great business decisions. Highly recommend checking them out. We have a lot of free data, which you can check out at yougov.com. I'll put the link in all the chats, yougov.com, all the chats that I can, yougov.com/BOE. That's yougov.com/BOE. Go show them some love. If you want to get in touch with them, can reach out to any of us. We're happy to connect you with the folks at YouGov. Chris says, I don't watch Liquid and tell myself I want a Honda. Agreed. But when you go out, their hope is that when you do decide to go buy a car, all of this sort of Honda advertising that you've watched, being a huge Liquid fan, may make you at least think about going into a Honda dealership. This is how advertising works. And I think it could work. I think you can use it to create brand affinity. I just don't think they went about it the right way. All right, guys, let's talk about what did I have here? Oops. WoW. Actually, I want to talk about WoW in the news. So I want to get your take on this, guys, because
Race to World just really excited.
is happening. World of Warcraft. Yeah. Wow. And the headline here: WoW veteran Chris Metzen is once again working on Warcraft. So Metzen's work as a creative advisor will first focus on World of Warcraft before contributing to other projects set in the Warcraft universe. So Chris Metzen, who's one of the fathers of World of Warcraft, is coming back to Blizzard after he departed in 2016. It was announced on Twitter. He's going to return to working on World of Warcraft, like I mentioned, but that it will expand. His role will expand. He was one of the original team members when the work on World of Warcraft began in 1994. So he really worked on it for 20 years and helped create the world that exists today in World of Warcraft. Now, he also served as lead designer on StarCraft, worked heavily on Diablo 2 and more. Obviously, the guy's a legend at Blizzard. And when he left Blizzard, he founded his own tabletop gaming company called Warchief Gaming. Now, what do you guys think? I obviously would love to spend an hour talking about World of Warcraft, but let's try and take this from a business standpoint, right? My criticism of Blizzard has been that they're not focused on the games anymore. First of all, do you think this is a return to trying to bring back some of the Blizzard magic, hire back some of the original people who care deeply about these games? Two, do you think it's crazy to put more dollars and effort into a 15, essentially 20-year-old game, if you count the development time, right? And three, do you think this hints at potentially a sequel, like a real sequel to World of Warcraft? This is why they're bringing back sort of the big gun.
Okay. I'm happy to start because I think Jimmy started last time. But I actually was just listening to a podcast recently about how typically when companies bring back, it was in relation to the Disney choice to bring back Bob Iger. Typically when companies bring back the really big successful CEO, they see, like, studies have shown that they actually see worse results than the previous CEO. So with that coloring my judgment.
Say why, Lindsay?
It basically comes down to people often the break time that happens, the systems change so much, and then the person tries to come back in and implement the old system that worked. And when I say systems, I mean like the world globally, not just necessarily like what's happening at one company or another. But things change so much, especially in tech, that the older person who had a really, really strong track record with a way of doing things, that has just completely gone by the wayside. That was there was a couple other reasons as well. And I listened to this about 3 weeks ago. So I can send it if you want to hear it. But anyways, the point is, with that coloring my judgment, I don't think this is going to like save WoW. But at the same time, WoW has not been unseated. There is still a hugely active player base. There are so many people that just love WoW. And this is the first time in a while that they've given any type of new life to the direction of it. So I'm at least excited about that. Maybe he will be the one that shirks the trend and is super successful. In general, I think we've all on the show for years now been aching for Activision Blizzard to bring in some innovation, to try something different, to think about any type of new strategy that could be interesting to its fans that are very loyal through, again, getting very little out of it. So from that perspective, I am excited about this. From a historical perspective, I am less sure that this is going to be a smashing success.
I like it. Jimmy, what do you think of Lindsay's theory? Bringing back sort of the sort of, not star, but the heart of the operation,
Well, I think it's interesting the stat that these companies tend to do worse when that happens. So I mean, is that commonly known? Did they analyze that and agree with that? I don't know. I can't tell if this is them trying to recapture the magic or just hiring someone who's the best experienced person for the job because, who better? It's interesting. I think the last time we talked about WoW was when they canceled WoW Mobile, right? With that developer where the contract, I think, was terminated, and we all had our different suspicions because WoW Mobile sounded like a great idea to some of us, maybe not to you, Paul, but I thought it was a great idea. And so I wonder if this is really the makings of a sequel, or maybe they're going to revisit WoW Mobile. Would they be better off spending that money into new IP? I think they need to do both. I don't think you can have IP as successful as WoW and fail to continue to iterate off of it. I don't think that means more expansions, right? I think, like you said, a sequel, maybe exploring it on mobile or through a different, first-person perspective or a non-MMO. Like, what else can we do with these characters in this universe? I don't know what that looks like. I'm just saying you have something that a lot of people care deeply about, and you've really failed to attract, I think, younger audiences, because I don't have the time I used to have in 2005 when I was, waking up and spending every hour grinding. But they got to do something to get those younger audiences back. So I'm interested to see what they put out. I hope they revisit mobile, and I hope that they look into non-MMO genres, honestly, because if WoW is associated with it, I will probably take a look at it.
Yeah, that was the sort of the little teaser part of the story, right? I'm sure the PR person who pitched the story made sure to say, make sure you mention that he's going to be doing other things too than just WoW, because it makes you believe that there's other games in the works, which I'm doubtful, but I guess it's possible that they have absolutely new games in the works. I think what is most scary for me is how this gets up the hopes of WoW players, right? Because the WoW players are either going to be in for the biggest, gift surprise, positive surprise of all time, or it's going to be the most soul crushing. Like, if they just come out with another expansion and the expansion's terrible, and we find out that he's the one that worked on it. In some ways, it's risky, right? You got a lot of people's hopes up that the star is coming back. It's risky for him too, because there's a lot of expectation. He left a hero. I don't know. Maybe he comes back the even bigger hero, but maybe he doesn't. And I think that's an interesting. You got to credit Chris Metzen here that he clearly believes in his ability to do something interesting with this franchise. Otherwise, I don't think you would come back. I don't think you would risk sort of the reputation you've built to come back and do something just mediocre or just another expansion or something like that. So I'm excited. I'm excited what he brings. But I don't know if the rest of Blizzard sort of is up to the task of whatever Chris Metzen's vision might be. So that'll be interesting to see. Guys, I have one last story before we wrap up here. And that is, why are my stories all out of order? This is an interesting story around Free Fire, Garena Free Fire, which is a big mobile esport. And the headline here: Free Fire esports viewership fell more than 90%, but why? So the Free Fire, according to, I thought this article flew under the radar. This story flew under the radar. So Free Fire World Series 2021 Singapore holds the record with 5.4 million peak viewers. It's bigger. It was bigger than tournaments like TI and League of Legends World Championship. However, they just finished the Free Fire World Series Bangkok, and it had peak viewership of just 354,000, which is 90% off from the peak viewership they had just 1 year ago. Now, the article tries to find sort of reasons for this. So, language differences, region differences. It could be that they're losing essentially footing in places like Latin America and Southeast Asia, where PUBG Mobile is gaining a lot of steam. So it could be just competition for mobile esports. But the Garena Free Fire game, their parent company, reported $1 billion loss in the last quarter, laid off a bunch of workers. 15% of the game's staff in the Shanghai office were let go. So I'm curious what you guys think might be the reason for you have a mobile esport that is played by many, was reasonably very successful, I think by any measure, put up big numbers last year, and then all of a sudden falls off. Do you guys think this is maybe the nature of mobile esports? Do you think it's just competition from PUBG Mobile? Like, what do you chalk this up to in your mind?
This is
Jimmy,
definitely a tough one. Definitely a tough one. I played Free Fire. I had a company that partnered with them and did a little bit of work over there. It was very popular, right? And it was funny because I had never heard of it, and we were like, oh my god, this is the #1 game, in this region, and something I never heard of. I downloaded it immediately. I think I won my first game, and then I never played again because I didn't, want to get thrown into harder lobbies. It was actually really fun. It kind of felt a little bit like a PUBG meets Fortnite ripoff. But it was fun. It was interesting enough to keep my attention. If the drop off was something more reasonable, Paul, like 20%, or not even reasonable, because 20% is massive, right? I think anything over 8%, honestly, depending on what you're measuring, is usually where I start to take a deeper look and say, this isn't just natural attention being lost. It's like you have to do something intentional to lose that badly, is kind of how it feels. So otherwise it's out of their hand, and maybe there's a governmental explanation or something else, but it just 90% is not organic to me. It seems like something is intentionally being shut down or off over there. Not saying the developer themselves are destroying their own game, but I don't know enough about these other factors. All I know is, that raises a lot of red flags, and I wouldn't put all of the blame on on PUBG being better or another title or them not doing enough with esports and marketing. Something doesn't ring true there, right? But I haven't educated myself enough to really go beyond that.
Lindsay, your thoughts or theories?
Yeah, I don't want to, like Jamie said, this is such a big drop off. I feel like there has to be a reason out there that's the lion's share for it. A couple weeks ago when we were talking about mobile games, and I had that comment like, well, there's a lot of good movies. Why don't we stop making movies then? And how basically the point was that consumer attention just jumps from thing to thing to thing to thing. I do think mobile esports has to consider that. I think that when you're talking about the structure of mobile esports, I do expect it to be more cyclical, which I think has some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantage is that there's always a new way to hook an audience, which is nice. The disadvantage, obviously, is it's much harder to build up those legacy audiences that stick around year over year. That's where I think the power of creators really comes in. So it's like if you are a mobile esports professional, then you probably have to be a pretty dynamic individual as well to make sure that your audience actually sticks around. I think that in 5 years, this model is going to look so different. So I'm curious to see, maybe there will be that mobile game that like rises above all of them, and we play it for 20 years and there's a league for it. I don't know. But as of right now, I think we're definitely in an economy like a mobile games economy where people are jumping from thing to thing to thing. So I'm not super surprised that the one that was massively popular this year isn't massively popular the next year. Surprised at like how much that dropped, but I guess I'm not surprised by the loss in dominance. I'm surprised by like the result of being at the bottom. Like this wasn't just like a little shift. This was completely over. But in general, I think it says a lot about the structure of mobile esports.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lindsay. I think, but I'll take it one step further and say I think this is where they'll struggle. That it's too easy to just replicate something on mobile, right? Like the differences between first-person shooter games on mobile are basically non-existent. They're all the same, right? You tap the same button to shoot. You like the graphics look about the same. The platform is so limited that I think all the games are basically just copycats of each other. So if you're trying to build an esports scene around that, it's not that easy. I think the other thing I forgot to mention, which was mentioned in the article, is Garena C, which is the parent company, owned a streaming platform called Booyah, which they shut down. And one possibility is they were juicing the numbers with their own platform, which calls into question all of these numbers coming out of Asia in general. Like that, to me, the takeaway here is you sort of can't ever believe numbers coming out of Asia. You always have to take them with a grain of salt, or discount them in some way because you don't really know how they're being measured, where they're being measured. And to me, when you go 1 year to the next, even if no one's playing Free Fire anymore, which is not the case, a 90% drop in viewership to me says the baseline was probably, false to begin with. You to Jimmy's point, yeah, maybe 20%, 30% drop, right? The game's fallen off, not as many people watching or playing. To drop 90%, I think you have to start questioning the validity of those numbers in that 2021 year, which is not surprising, I guess, when you look at the Asian market and especially when you look at mobile. All right, guys, that wraps up this week's weekly news show. I just wanted to say, don't miss the podcast this week. No, it's our holiday, basically, episode. So Merry Christmas to all of our listeners, all of our viewers. Thank you guys for supporting the live show, the podcast this whole year. We will continue to do episodes, so you're going to get basically a New Year's episode also. But just want to say thank you to everyone. Also, don't forget, follow us everywhere: LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. You name it, on every platform, you can find content from Business of Esports, so make sure to follow us everywhere. Thank you to Jimmy. Thank you to Lindsay. As always, thank you guys in the chat who showed up. Appreciate all of you. And don't forget, the most important thing, guys, the future is fun. We'll see you next week.